How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
The Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. Alan Medlock's still out on the baseball field, so we have not one, not two, but three guests for you tonight. It's the Cardinals Off Day crew. We have Mr. Godar, Mr. Humphries, and Mr. Chibnall. And we may be using a lot of last names because we got a lot of Bens and Dans floating around here. It's always dangerous to know who might be talking to who. But guys, how are you tonight?
Doing good. Always a lot of fun to get on and chat with you. Actually, my son who's 11, I told him I was doing a podcast tonight, and he said, "Oh, that means it's almost baseball season." So I share a bit of his enthusiasm.
You're training them up right. So, Mr. Humphries, how is it at your house?
Oh, things are going well. I have the two little ones in bed. They have spring break from preschool, and our 4-year-old has decided he's not taking naps this week, so it only took me about 90 seconds to get him to go to sleep tonight because he was wiped out with the nice weather and everything.
That's exactly how you want it. Dan, how about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Consider me like the Andy Richter of this whole thing. I'm like further down the couch from all of you guys. So, maybe I can say something funny along the way, but no, I'm on spring break too. I am, but I also have to work, but I took part of the day off to go see a movie at Godar's Theater, and it was fantastic. So it was a great way to spend a Thursday.
You can't argue with that. If you're not watching a baseball game, that's another good way to do it. Anything that's not at work always is a good way to spend a Thursday. So we have you all here. It has been a bit since the Cardinal Off Day has popped up. How did y'all spend the winter?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Ben, you want to go first?
Well, I spent the winter mainly, shopping for Christmas presents for our 3 children, and then trying to find activities to keep the little ones busy and allow them to burn energy when it, is like 10 degrees out here in Iowa. And really longing for baseball season, because even though we had some snow early, but not a lot of snow through the middle and end of winter. But even so, It's pretty cold, and it's tough to find stuff for the little ones to do in weather like that. So that kept me pretty busy. And then I just kept checking my phone to see if the Cardinals had traded Brendan Donovan and wondering why they had not done that yet.
It was a very active off season for the Cardinals. Dan, I mean, and I know Ben had a very Mr. Godar had a very, very busy winter. But Dan, how about you? I mean, how did you spend the off season?
Well, I'm a reader, and so I do quite the bulk of my reading in the wintertime. And I always try to pepper in plenty of baseball books. So that's how I sort of stay. I mean, I keep my eye on the Cardinals, but I also, it kind of creates an eternal springtime in my mind when I'm able to read baseball books. And so I read some really good ones this winter and really enjoyed them. So that helps me have something to think about while I'm stranded inside when it's so cold outside.
I know you are a big book reader, and often will put them out in different places.
Mhm.
Which one this winter was your favorite?
Oh man, that's tough. It was a close tie between a classic that I had actually never read before, called "You Gotta Have Wa" by Robert Whiting, which is the definitive book on the history of Japanese baseball. And it's really great. I mean, the research and the history of it is fantastic. It's really funny. The profiles of the players, and he poured through newspaper archives and interviews. It's just so good, and it gives you this sort of really nice glimpse of how Japanese baseball has evolved. But the other one that just really hit home for me is by one of my favorite baseball writers, Andrew Forbes. He's a Canadian writer. And this was his third or fourth baseball book, and it's called Fieldwork. And it's all about sort of like the blue collar aspects of baseball, not just players, but like stadium workers and the people who work really hard jobs and then go to the ballpark at the end of the day. And it's just sort of this collection of essays that he writes about the blue collarness of baseball. So those were the two that really stood out to me this winter.
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I remember the first coming out a number of decades ago, but I had not heard the other ones. That's cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Godar, everything okay?
Yeah, I think you're alluding to. I had to have my aortic heart valve replaced towards the end of last season, and so I had that done up at the Mayo Clinic, and so I got to spend about 6 weeks on the couch watching lots of movie. At one point I was like, I'm going to watch all these art films and things like that. But, instead I just ended up watching Roadhouse, so that was much more enjoyable. But no, but I'm all, recovered from that and kind of back to normal and everything. So it was a little bit of an off-season adventure, but now I'm back and ready to watch whatever Cardinals baseball in 2026 is.
And that's a really good way to start looking at this. What is Cardinal baseball in 2026 going to look like? We had maybe the busiest off season that we've had in quite some time. And here we are just a week from opening day. And I don't think we still have a real good grasp on this, do we, Mr. Humphries?
Well, I think that there's a lot that we're going to get to see, and that's the way that the team has been set up. You talked about the busy off season, and that Sonny Gray trade was about as much of a mission statement for the off season and the 2026 season as you're going to get, because when you looked at that team, and even when with the money coming off the books, and yes, ownership, they sent some extra money to get more prospects coming. But when you looked at the team last year, they had a lot of injuries at the upper levels of the minors, and they had virtually no pitching depth with respect to the rotation because of that. And they were lucky. They didn't have anyone get hurt. Now, some in the media will have you believe that was all by design and the Cardinals have cracked the code on pitcher health. I'm going to wait a couple of years and see if they have actually found something, or if they just had old guys and young guys who don't throw very hard or spin the ball much and got lucky. But they didn't have a lot of depth. And so, you look at Sonny Gray, he's getting older, he's getting more expensive. You look at Wilson Contreras, again, getting older, more expensive. They needed that upper level depth for the majors, but then they also needed, kind of some more higher potential players as well. And with all the trades that they did to bolster that rotation, I think they accomplished that. And they have really layered on the depth. So they have infused new talent, and now they're going to have players coming back from injury as well. And they have also allowed themselves to structure the major league rotation so they don't have to rush anyone to the majors. They have 5 starters. How many of them will be on the next competitive Cardinals team is definitely an open question. And I think that, they're the first wave, but I think throughout the year, as there are injuries, maybe there are trades, we're going to get to see more of the younger pitchers who will probably be a part of that next winning team. And so that's really what I think I am most interested in seeing is how this new player development group works with the major league staff to break these young pitchers into the majors. And we'll see what type of success they have and whether or not they can build a strong foundation for the future.
I have already screwed this up because we're supposed to do the what are we watching for at the end of the episode, right? Isn't that the way this structure goes?
Very true, very true. Thanks for listening, Daniel. We appreciate it. As Ben was talking there and said, we don't know how many of these starters are going to be part of the Cardinals' long-term future. I thought to myself, I would set the over/under at 0.5.
Yeah.
I'm being totally serious because, I think Liberatore is probably a coin toss, to be part of it. I think maybe McGreevy has a very outside chance, end of list. And it's kind of the same on the, position player side. I feel like a lot of what we're going to be doing is, just kind of waiting to see like who out there is going to step up and be part of whatever that next competitive Cardinals team is. And there's very few positions that are spoken for, I think, Mason Wynn is the one, guy on the position player side that really firmly, okay, yeah, this guy, he's going to be a part of that next competitive Cardinals team. I think we're all very optimistic about JJ Weatherholt, but of course he's played 0 major league games, so we don't want to get ahead of ourselves there. And your Gormans, your Victor Scotts, etc. I think there's some of those other guys who I think you can hope for, and I think maybe one of those guys from that group kind of steps forward as well. But that you're at that point you're talking about this season, maybe having 3 position players and 1 starting pitcher, and what I would term as a pretty good overall outcome that are going to be part of your next competitive team. So I really think a lot of it's going to be just kind of playing those games while other talent that's in the minors or that they can continue to bring into the system ultimately gets here to really take those spots.
To shift a little bit backwards, Dan, Ben was talking about the trade of Sonny Gray making the most of an impact, that really kind of set the tone. If there was a trade, one of those trades that you felt was the most important this winter, which one would it be?
Oh man, that's hard. I think I would have to go with the Donovan trade just because of the obviously you're giving up a really great player in Brendan Donovan. But at the same time, you're also getting back some really intriguing talent in Saintja and Ledbetter and Ty Pete, and then you're also getting draft picks. So you're just loading up on the minor league talent there. And so even though it's always hard to, it was funny because I was talking to a friend of mine who he doesn't pay as much attention as like we do to the Cardinals stuff, and he's like, I don't know if I'm ready for this rebuild. I mean, maybe I am. And I said, well, we're going to have to trade some guys to kind of start over. He's like, I think I'm okay with that. I said, one of them might be Donovan. He's like, oh, I'm not okay with that. So it's just like, even though it's coming, it's still hard,
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that was the really intriguing one, just to see. Obviously, Seattle gets, a great player right off the bat. But, time will tell if these other guys, pan out, but I really hope that they do. I'm kind of the optimist, I think, of this group. I'm always the one who's like, hey, maybe something good will happen, or hey, maybe this guy will look good. And that's when the Bens usually shoot me down like, Dan, you forgot about this statistic, or oh no, there's no way, this team is garbage, So that helps bring me back down to earth. But that would be my answer. But and real quick, a stat I just learned a few days ago, of the players on the 40-man roster for the Cardinals, only 3 of them are above the age of 30. So this is a very young set of guys.
Yeah, I think most of us probably have clothing that is older than most of these players.
Mm-hmm.
And it is weird. And Mr. Hummer, you often are talking about football brain in the way that people are bringing or coming to baseball these days. How frustrating is it going to be if you have that mindset to watch this team? Because if you're living and dying every day, you're going to do a lot of dying.
Yeah, it could be frustrating. Luckily, we have a lot of practice over the last few years, and I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities to be excited about young guys, and that goes a long way, especially with pitchers. Like, it's really fun to watch like a good young pitcher with good stuff. And I was trying to think of the last time we had someone where it's like, you've got to see this guy's stuff. Like, when was the last time the Cardinals drafted and developed and called up a young pitcher where everyone was abuzz about how great their stuff was and about this person's future? And I think we're going to have, multiple guys like that in the next 2-3 years, in addition to the position players. And so I think it's going to be frustrating if you're looking at the box score and thinking about the playoff picture. But I also think that there's sunlight on the horizon, and we're going to get a taste of the future, in bites throughout the next couple of years, and that is also fun when you're kind of seeing these young players come up, and you can wish on what these guys might be in 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, that's an interesting question on the pitching side. I don't know. Is Alex Reyes the answer to that?
Probably, I think he probably is. Yeah.
I was going to say Flaherty, but
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I feel like it was kind of Carlos Martinez and Michael Wacha the last point where it felt like they had, a surplus of pitching talent that was, coming up, and and they, that I feel like that was right around the same, fairly close to when Joe Kelly came up, and Lance Lynn wasn't that far, ahead of that, and a few other guys. So it's been a minute.
A little bit. That was back when you could trade players like Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen because you had so many pitchers that were going to pan out.
That's true. Yep.
And not as much.
Be sure you put a trigger warning on this episode, Daniel, for bringing that up.
And now I think we have 4 pitchers in the top 10 of the Cardinals prospects. Doyle, Saintja, Quinn Matthews. 5, Brandon Clark and Tekoa Roby.
Yeah, it is such a shift just from, when we were talking this time last year, the minor league system didn't look anything like this, right? We were excited about JJ Weatherholtz already by that point in time, but the revamp that has happened over the last 12 months is probably unprecedented, right? I can't think of any time that it's ever happened like that. What do you think, Mr. Godar?
I would agree. They haven't really done a rebuild, right? The last time they sort of needed to was in the 90s, and rebuilds hadn't been invented yet, right? So right. we really haven't seen it. And I'm looking at like the MLB pipeline. list right now. And as Dan kind of alluded to there, it's almost it's dominated by guys that have just arrived here in the last year or two, kind of under the some level of the Heim Bloom oversight. So and that's all really encouraging. And I know some of the kind of prospect watch groups have rated the system pretty high already. So I mean, I'm not real optimistic about the major league team this year, but some of these teams have done rebuilds. It's a 5-year project. It's very long, and there's a lot to see here and think that it will be faster that this whole rebuild happens.
Yeah, and it's with the way they've changed the draft lottery and various things like that, it's not the tanking, lose 120 games, that kind of thing, try to get the top pick. That's not the kind of rebuild that the Cardinals are doing, which makes it a little bit more palatable. I think if we had to watch, like the Rockies and the White Sox over the last couple of years, it would be much more of a struggle to find those silver linings. I mean, Dan, what do you think? I mean, could you stomach watching a Cardinals team that lost 120 games?
Yeah, I think so. Like I wrote to a friend recently who told me that they weren't going to watch that many games this year. And I said, look, there's going to be baseball. Will it be good baseball? Probably not. Will they lose a lot of games? Yes, but it'll still be baseball. And that's sort of the optimist in me, that I'm excited to see who pans out and who doesn't. To me, it's kind of like a weird science experiment. And I kind of want to see who gels and who doesn't, who's got the talent and who doesn't. But yeah, watching the bullpen or even blow something catastrophically, or watching a starter leave in the first inning. I mean, we kind of saw that with Miles Michaelis too, but it'll be hard to see that with some of these young guys too. But I think I can stomach it. Whether or not I continue to applaud myself for buying Cardinals.TV subscription, that'll be another thing once they start losing that many games. But I remember you asked the last time they did a rebuild, and I had to go back through my mental archive. I remember the early 90s, and for some reason, the name Scott Coolbaugh jumped out at me, because I remember he played first base for one hot minute for the Cardinals during their last rebuild before the strike. And then everything changed in 95. So anyway, there's your remembering some guys, Scott Coolbaugh.
Yeah, Scott Coolbaugh. I was trying to remember. I remembered Scott Cooper.
Yeah.
And I remember Mike Coolbaugh, but I've forgotten that Scott Coolbaugh was a thing too, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah, man. We're going to quickly descend into old man territory, but that's okay. Usually I have Alex Christofoli on for that. So we'll just get a little ahead of the game here and start, pointing back to those end of the Brewery years about Bob Horner and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. And I mean, that is a difference. And Ben, you kind of pointed to that, right? The last time they did this was the 90s, and they didn't rebuild. They just kind of went and bought the Athletics and brought them all into St. Louis, and it all worked out well. That 96 team was more green than red, it felt like. This is a whole new thing, and I'm very interested to see how it's going to pan out.
Daniel.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention along those lines, if you haven't read it yet, there was a really good interview with Heim Bloom done by Tyler Kepner of The Athletic. I think it came out either today or yesterday. But he actually, at one point, he asks Bloom about whether or not, going forward, are the Cardinals going to kind of swim in the waters of signing a big free agent or trading for a big name player at some point. And he kind of, it's sort of like just a very bland answer, but he makes the point. He's like, yes, eventually we will try to do something like that. But right now the key is forming, a strong homegrown backbone. And I think that's what we're seeing, with all this acquisition of all this talent, especially all the pitchers. So anyway, just a shout out, because it's a pretty good interview and I enjoyed reading it. So.
Yeah, for the fact that Heim Bloom was kind of kept under wraps for the last year and a half, those have come off, because there was that interview, and then of course Derek Gould got a chance to do one for the season preview for the paper that was out, I think maybe even today as well. And I guess, Mr. Humphries, let's go there. What about this change at the top? What have you seen just in the things that Heim has said that makes you maybe more optimistic than the end of the Musial era?
I think that the number one thing that jumps out at me is, the Cardinals are in a declining revenue situation, but ownership is supportive of Bloom, and by all accounts, he is allowed to do what he needs to do to get player development up to speed. But his words, like, he's just a very polished guy. He knows what to say. He knows how to say it. And I think he's new to it, and he articulates what we have been hearing since Walt Jocketty got fired, right? Like, what Chaim Bloom is saying is what they were saying when Mozeliak took over, and it is what they implemented, really. And kind of reached a crescendo. Maybe, what were they? They were the organization of the year. Was that in 2011 or 2013? I can't remember which World Series they played in when they were named the MLB organization of the year. And they were having all this success, and then the farm system was fully stocked with all these guys who they were going to call up, and they were going to be the next core. And so, he very much has taken the baton from Mozeliak and is running with it. And that baton is the DeWitt vision for what this is going to look like. And, Dan talking about the quote with Kepner, Bill DeWitt Jr. painted the Redbird Club, the air-conditioned area up on the second level. Yeah. It is painted with a mural of his baseball card collection. And if you're a baseball card collector, yeah, I like my homegrown guys. I like signing them to extensions. But do you know what I like even more is Hall of Famers, and that has also been a through line. Whether it's keeping Yadier Molina, trying the first Pujols extension, the McGuire extension, the Edmonds extension, the Roland extension, Wainwright extension. The ownership group wants Hall of Famers. They want plaques. They want red jackets and lifetime Cardinals. And so it sure seems to me like Bloom is taking that vision and putting a 21st century stamp on it in terms of technology and what all they have learned in terms of metrics and those types of things. And, I would also add a lot's been made over the spring training facility this year being open and how it's new and it coincides with Bloom and all of these things. And, I think we all remember all of the issues the Cardinals ran into trying to get that done sooner. Mm-hmm. And, I honestly can't help but wonder if they had not run into all of the things that were outside of their control, or not necessarily influence, but, they have to go through certain processes and get these things lined up and get the work done. Like, where would they be? And it's all just been very interesting to see that Bloom has ownership buy-in, and he has been very aggressive in implementing what they need to do. And he's kind of done it on two tiers, with getting a bunch of guys who are knocking on, AAA or the majors door, and then also getting guys in the lower minors. And it kind of reminds me of when DeWitt bought the Cardinals and Jocketty came in, and they signed and acquired a whole bunch of guys that were the first wave, and they gave us that taste. And then they got McGuire, and then they got Edmonds, and then they got Kyle, and that was really when everything came together. And so I'm interested to see how the upper minors level of the acquisitions pan out versus the lower level minor leaguers that have been acquired. I think that's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that, and it's going to be very interesting to see just how fast it goes, right? And granted, as you mentioned, things that about Jupiter, things that were out of their control. Some of the things, it's hard to say it's completely out of their control given the power that Bill DeWitt has, but there's a lockout coming next year, most likely. And however long that lasts could make an impact on this window that the Cardinals may have. I mean, when you factor everything in, Dan, when do you think the Cardinals will be contenders, or at least, in that, hey, they've kind of turned the corner from rebuild to being what they are?
Ooh, I mean, that's tough, but if we're thinking about, I mean, you mentioned the lockout, so it's really hard to predict how that's going to
Mhm.
affect anything. My hope is that maybe it's like the last one, so it kind of goes into spring training. It doesn't eat up any season games, but you never know. But I mean, in my head, I keep thinking like, this season, and then plus, I would say probably if we don't go out and immediately start spending on big free agents or make some kind of a trade, to acquire a big bat or a big arm, I'm thinking probably not till 29. That's how I'm seeing it. So, because I just don't think these things happen overnight unless we can somehow summon the Cardinal Devil magic of old. Uh, but yeah, so I see it more as a long term project, and I think that's one of the reasons why. I mean, obviously they traded Donovan because he had a lot of value, but also because, like, hey, if he's basically at the peak value right now. And even, I heard people say, oh, why don't we keep him and he can be part of the rebuild? And it's like, well, because by the time we're good again, he'll be a free agent. And so it's sort of like, just trade him for talent now. So, and he's going to be a free agent in what, 2 years? So to me, that's how in my head, I see it as like 29 is the year we're back. But who knows? Maybe the devil magic comes back and we're better sometime next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, and Dan mentioned earlier all the guys, being under 30, which is true. But there are kind of two groups. There's the young guys and there's the old young guys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Donovan was one of the old young guys,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say guys like Burleson and Newtbar are also old young guys, and those are guys who are you have to feel the team, and so they'll be out there and they'll be playing, and they'll contribute and they'll do some stuff, but those are guys that I think their personal window is going to be closing as that the Cardinals are opening, and I know Dan said 29. I think 28 could even be kind of competitive if on the early end if things go that way, but those guys are probably 30 or by that point, right? So so yeah, there's a little bit of a split there in terms of who of these guys are really prospects for that next Cardinals team, and who are just kind of placeholder guys.
I hope you're right, Godar.
Yeah. And then you've got the guys that may not be old, but they feel like they're old because they've been around for a while, right? I mean,
Like
Nolan
Jordan Walker?
Gorman. Yeah, Nolan Gorman is hitting 26 sometime this year. Jordan Walker is what, 23 or something of that nature.
Yeah.
But being that they've been here for 4 years, 5 years now and have struggled, it's harder and harder to imagine those guys on the next great Cardinal team, even though, if we were drawing this up 2 or 3 years ago, they would have been, the faces of. And I mean, again, we've seen some things in spring. I know how much y'all probably put into spring training stats, which is little to nothing. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is with those two guys. And I mean, Mr. Humphries, do you think there's a chance that those guys could still be part of the next good team?
I would be very surprised. I was joking with Ben and Dan. The Cardinals haven't even really given us a reason to lie to ourselves about their ability to turn things around, because they brought back, the major league coaching staff. Like, like if they brought in like a new manager and a new hitting coach, and you've got these new player development guys, like maybe you could be like, hey, maybe they'll be able to, help them crack the code of what it takes to be a consistent high level performer at the major leagues. And you just don't see it. And you look at the raw tools and the power, and it's so enticing. But you also have to look at, if these two guys were not developmental failures, how good would the Cardinals have been over the last 3 years? Like, if they were good, what does this team look like? And, would we even be in a rebuild right now? Like, and it's just, something to think about. And so you talked about football brain. I'm already getting some backup quarterback syndrome on Josh Baez, who hasn't even taken an at bat in AAA. And so, people are very anxious to replace Walker. And, I can't say that I blame them. He last year, I think, took a step backwards. I think that's safe to say. And was frustrating to watch. And so, you feel for him. And there's this part of me that, he seems like a good guy. He's still young. And there's this part of me, honestly, that just kind of is like, let's just let him go somewhere else and see if he can figure it out there. Cause it just feels like it's not going to happen here.
Yeah. I mean, there are, even for all the best intentions and whatever the case may be, when you've had so much failure in one spot, it can kind of linger on you, I would guess. And, I don't know what the answer is besides you're right. Maybe it is going somewhere else, but for this season, it feels like they're going to run him out there and continue to try to figure out what it is, because it doesn't sound like the minors is going to be what they want to see out of him. I mean, Mr. Godard, is that a reasonable expectation, or should they, maybe kind of cut their losses and send him to Memphis?
Yeah, I don't know that there's. I don't know that there's much to be gained by sending him to Memphis, and I think he's an interesting case because the age, when you look at the number on his age, it is still pretty young, right? And so that in and of itself is reason to be hopeful. But we're kind of down to that being like the only reason to be hopeful. And with Walker, I mean his defense is like unplayable to like one tick above unplayable at best. And with the bat, obviously we have the everything on the ground, but he also just his swing decisions are pretty bad. Taking strikes in the zone, swinging at balls outside the zone, and that's like three major holes in his game. And I am just not optimistic at there being development that can be done to kind of cure each of those things. I'm much more optimistic about Gorman, and I would agree with Ben. I don't think Gorman's likely to be part of that next kind of competitive Cardinals team, but I still think that's maybe more of a possibility because Gorman's had more success at the major league level. I think there's fewer issues with his swing and plate approach and everything, though of course there are some, and and he's proved himself an adequate, like a playable defender. So if you were going to be hopeful about one of those guys, I would be more hopeful about Gorman, but they definitely are looking like two guys who just may not reach the levels that the very, very high levels that we had all hoped for them. But that's baseball.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, I guess, that both of those guys were very highly rated players that fell in the draft, right? Because we were very surprised the Cardinals were able to get both of them in the the mid rounds, the mid first round or later. And maybe that's a development thing, or maybe there was just something there that other teams realized. Who knows? I mean, there's so many variables in both of those guys that it's hard to point out, this is where everything went wrong. Dan, if you were talking about everything that's going wrong, if you could point out one thing that would actually go right this year, if you were looking at this team, what is one thing that the 2026 Cardinals will do well?
That the 2026 Cardinals will do well. Wow. Oh my God. That's God. I'd have to. It's so hard to pick. I'm going to go with my gut here, and just the first thing that popped into my head that I think is going to be a positive that I'm looking forward to, that I think they're going to do well, is try to give Ivan Herrera as many at bats as possible. Because to me, he's like I'm the most optimistic about him more than anything else. I know he's had the knee thing in spring, but I think that if he stays healthy, and them trotting him out there as often as they can, be that as, hopefully his catching has improved, with that surgery that he had and some of the work he did. I'm not as hopeful about that part, but I think if they're going to do something well, it's going to be put him in the lineup as often as you possibly can, because that bat showed some real pop last year, and I'd love to see what he can do. Having just a regular season. So
If I put the over under at him catching games at 60, where would you go?
You know what? I'm actually gonna say over. I'm gonna take the over on that. Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna say something's gonna click. So
Well, as long as it's not as me, that's okay.
Daniel, I'm going to take the under, and I would be happy to put some money on that with you. So I thought you were going to say 6, and then you added a 0.
I'm going to write this down so I can laugh at all of you when he catches like 100 games this year. So
I would love it if you did. I
guess this is the time we're supposed to say that this show was brought to you by Bet365. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested to see how that shakes out. Mr. Humphries, what would you say if you were picking one thing that this Cardinals team could do well?
I think that the thing that they're going to do well is they're going to give players an opportunity to play themselves into the organization's plans. And, Herrera at catcher is a good example of that, right? Like, he probably shouldn't get an opportunity to be catching, but they're going to let him try because they aren't trying to win. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. But I also think that the other thing they're going to do well is they're not going to allow people who haven't performed at a level high enough to put themselves into those plans. They're not going to allow those people to block the up-and-comers who have performed and have earned an opportunity to get their shot. And I think that's been a frustration when you're trying to win now. There's kind of it feels like there's some momentum to when a player is ready for the majors and when they can break in. And I think that when that momentum is there, this organization is going to promote someone and give them the runway. I resurrected a Musial term, give them the runway to see if they can do what they need to do to establish themselves as big leaguers with a future with the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch, because I think there will probably be some players who get supplanted where we're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, they were doing pretty well. But it's like, yeah, they were, but wait till you see this guy. And it's just going to be a little bit of a different approach than what we're used to seeing.
On the flip side of that, or maybe to go along with it in a different way, I think there won't be this desire to push somebody up just because they need to fill a hole, right? I mean, if they're not ready, they'll figure out something, whether it's playing somebody out of position for 2-3 weeks or whatever the case may be, just so that they're not, bringing up Liam Doyle before he needs to be, just to make a spot start and go back to Memphis. I don't feel like, again, when you're not trying to win, you don't feel like you have that necessity of, we've got to win today and this guy helps us do that, versus looking at the long term.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I almost have this, I wouldn't quite call it a theory. I honestly wonder if attendance is better this year, or just, not that we could really measure like vibes, but like, don't you guys kind of almost feel like the vibes are better going into this year than they have been? And I think it's just that everybody's kind of on the same page, like, it's okay, we are rebuilding, like we are doing this. And I feel more sort of like optimism around that. Whereas, the last couple of years, it was like, no, we're still competitive. We're, duct taping this, car together while we're driving it. And I think everybody knew that wasn't working, that wasn't going to work. And so there was a lot of disappointment. So I feel like where we have room this year is for, to be surprised and, things to be like hopeful for, as opposed to just like, let's see exactly how this car wreck happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've picked a lane, and it's a lot easier and more interesting to see Quinn Matthews put up a 5 ERA in the majors than Miles Michaelis, because there is no upside to having Miles Michaelis, but there could be with Quinn Matthews. So I agree. I think now it's not universal, and there are people out there that are still grumping and griping, but I think for the most part, just it feels like at least online fan base has gotten somewhat behind this, just because maybe it's because it's Hein Bloom and not John Mozeliak. Maybe it is, but I think it's more about they know what they want to do now instead of, like you said, trying to put it all together on the fly.
Yeah, and I agree, Daniel. In the narrow corner of Cardinals internet sickos that we all inhabit, optimism is high.
I wanted to agree with what Godar said there, because it's true. I think that there is more positivity, but part of that is the fact that some of those traditional Cardinal fans have kind of removed themselves from the equation. They're either like, oh, I'm not paying attention this year, or they're trying to let as many of us know that they are mad about this. And we're kind of like, that's great. You just go be mad over there. We don't care. Right. So I think that removing them from the equation sort of increases the amount of optimism and hopefulness in the overall pie graph, if you were graphing this thing.
It's also safe to say that there hasn't been an actual ball game played yet now, so that optimism may go down the tube by the end of April. So we don't know that for sure, but I don't know. I agree. I think and maybe it's because it was an active off season. We didn't spend a whole lot of time dragging out whether the Cardinals were going to, sign another pitcher or, do this or do that. Hein Bloom was making trades basically once a month. I just felt like maybe people stayed involved and engaged a little bit more instead of letting some of the angst and, bitterness kind of build up. I don't know. I don't know if that was the release helped or what, but it's been nice.
Yeah, and I think part of the thing that it feels like almost like it's a pressure release valve. Mm-hmm. Like it was one of those things where change needed to happen. I think everyone recognized that, and now it's finally here, and it just feels like the temperature in the room has dropped because of it. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just like, okay, we have new people here who I am not sick of yet. We're going to give them a little bit of leash to do what they think they need to do to make this team good again, and we're okay with that. And I think you're seeing that with the, like trading players who fans like, Sonny Gray, Contreras, and Donovan. I mean, I think, three of the more popular, Arenado too, four of the more popular players. And there wasn't a huge, or at least I didn't really clock a huge backlash to that. And I think that speaks to everyone being like, yeah, this isn't working. We can't just keep running these guys out here because it's not going to get the job done. And so I think it's been interesting to see the way the vibes have kind of shifted. Even though the team's probably going to be worse than it's been any of the last 3 years this year, I think the vibes are better.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that were, maybe disappointed or sad or hated to see those players go, but I think most everybody understood, why it had to happen. And, to some degree, it's the old saying, we finished last with you, we can finish last without you. That it helps that they weren't exactly tearing apart the 27 Yankees either. So let's go ahead. I've been asking this question if you've listened, and I don't know that you have. But I have asked this question of everybody this year, and feel free to have the same answers. I'm not asking for variety necessarily, but The question is, if there's one player you're going to watch from a interest point, from an excitement point because of the narrative, whatever the case may be, if there's one player on the 26 Cardinals that you're going to watch, who is it? Mr. Godar, I'll start with you.
Well, Daniel, I have been listening. I really enjoy the podcast. So
It's kind of you to say.
It's true. It's true. I feel like this is a little basic of an answer, but I am going to say JJ Weatherholt. It seems pretty certain that he's going to, be with us in an everyday, job. And I believe our friend Kyle has said this, over on his podcast, he has yet to fail as a professional. He moved all through every minor league, no issues there. So he kind of basically has to be in the majors. And I just think, I don't know. He's I love watching him hit. Just a lot of fun. I'm not real sure. His defense, I think, is kind of a little bit of a question mark. I mean, he'll be fine, but I'm excited to see him. And I think part of that is of the young guys that are going to be, part of the major league team. I think he is the one that I feel it's most reasonable to allow myself to, dream on him, kind of, reaching that, all-star level player. So I'm going Weatherholt. And by the way, thanks for asking me first, so I could claim him.
Well, yes, I appreciate. I mean, I appreciated the $5 you gave me before the show too. Mr. Humphries, what do you think?
I think the player, and I know he's been optioned, but I think the player that I'm most interested to watch in the majors is probably Fitz. This year, as a pitcher, he has good stuff, and I'm interested to see how the Cardinals approach his pitch mix and how he deploys it. So it's probably Richard Fitz for me. But JJ Weatherholt, that's a pretty good choice, Mr. Godar. I cannot fault you for that one.
Thank you very much.
I think Fitz may be the guy that's come into spring training and raised his stock more than any. Again, he got demoted, but it was not because of anything that he did. It was, I think a lot of, I say a lot, I'm going to say me. I was like, okay, he's a guy that's coming in on this trade that, like we were talking about earlier, it helps with the depth, but it's not anything exciting. I think there's a lot to be excited about with him now after, again, it's spring, take it for what it's worth, but I'm very intrigued to see how long it will be before he gets a run at the major leagues. Dan, what do you think?
Well, actually, this is not surprising, but everything Godar said was actually in a Google Doc that I had written, and I think he hacked into it and just read it. So, Ben, you and I are going to have a talk later about that. So, yeah. Anyway, so my second choice would be, I love speed. And again, with this whole refresh thing that's going on and the rebuild and the fact, we've talked about that, they're not trying to win per se, but I would go with Victor Scott II because I love to watch him play defense. And here's the thing, and I'm hoping that every year his bat maybe gets a little bit better. I know that's a big hope with him, but I'd really love to see them unleash him on the base paths more. And I'm thinking maybe, with all this experimentation going on this year, maybe that comes into the mix more, But I'll also say too, that just as sort of like, an aside with him, he has so much personality, and I think he is hilarious. And I think we're going to need that this season because if we're only going to win 69 games or whatever, maybe less, we're going to need some just fun stuff happening from time to time. And I think he helps to bring that. But I really hope to see him do as well as he did last year and improve. But also, like I said, just unleash on the base paths.
Yeah, the Weatherholt Victor Scott fishing trip video that they released is one of the best, just like most endearing things I've ever seen. And so if that's, I'd love to see these guys be able to demonstrate a little more personality as well. And I don't know what exactly the elements of the Cardinals organization has been that has, that has not necessarily shown through, but that would be great too, especially with like younger players, just to, be able to see them, be out there and, let their freak flag fly, as it were. Because none of their flags are that freaky. Let's be honest. These are all baseball jocks. So a bunch of base bros.
I don't know if y'all saw the video that they did during winter warm-up where they took Weather Holt and put him in like a disguise.
I did. That was hilarious.
Yeah, and he went up and like Mason Wynn was like the only one that saw through it, but he was going up and get autographs from Burleson or anything like that. So I do, and I think it's probably a function of these young guys who don't have the weight of a career on them. They can be goofy, they can be fun. And hopefully the front office will take and get involved with that. I think Mason Wynn's a guy like that. I think Jordan Walker could be. I think he just has to get the weight of his performance off of him. And you put all those guys together, and it's definitely not the Cardinals that we're used to. It's not the Goldschmidt and Arenado Cardinals. It's the team that will hopefully have fun, even if the results aren't great. Like you said, Dan, we may need that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a fun time tonight, guys. The season starts a week from today. The first off day is a week from tomorrow. What are the plans? Is Cardinals off day? People are waiting with bated breath to find out. Is Cardinals off day coming back?
It is coming back. We're going to have preseason or kind of preseason episode we're planning to drop here in the next week. I will say that I think we may be veering away from our every single off day recording schedule that we've kept up the last several years. And that really just has to do with Ben and my and some of our other responsibilities. I'm sure people are going to assume that's because the team is terrible, but that's only a very small part of it. but we're definitely we're recording next week. We're planning to be recording this season, and frankly appreciate just people online who have asked us about it and reached out and everything. And it's just it's as you do these things, and it's nice when you get some feedback and people enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, when you're not just shouting into a void, it's always always a little bit better, for sure. Well, I know that the schedule makers obviously were big fans of the show because I gave a Thursday off day for the first 5 or 6 weeks. So I can understand not necessarily wanting to jump right into a weekly show.
Well, and that was also back writing about the Cardinals. I always used to grouse about trying to write something meaningful in April.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of like, yeah, hey, they played, this happened.
Yeah.
Try, the signal versus the noise. There's a lot of noise. And so it does get difficult to provide that type of insight when you're going off of like 10 games or 15 games or what the case may be.
Yeah. The sample's not much bigger than spring. It's just a little bit more important. Not as much. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining me tonight. I look forward to when y'all put the shows out. It will be always a lot of fun to listen and see how y'all react to everything. Next week we have we continue our podcast theme. We have the guys from Talking About Birds coming on. We'll be with you on Friday next week to talk about the first game of the season. So, and probably drawing lots of wild and random conclusions from one game. But until then, for Ben, for Dan, and me, good night.
Well, we didn't catch anything today. Sometimes that happens. But we're looking forward to the season. We're ready to go. We're geared up. Coming out here doing something relaxing to get away for a little bit. But, yeah, no fish today. What you got on that?
I got no fish, but it's definitely baseball season, so let's go Cards.
All right.